I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members, old and new, of the panel, officers, members of the public and press in attendance at today's meeting of 15th June 2023. Welcome to those who may be watching the meeting live on YouTube. I am Councillor Steve Rippon-Swain, Chairman of the Place and Sustainability Panel. I would like now to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping note.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. I would remind those in attendance to use your microphones when speaking and remember to switch it off once you have finished. Please also switch any mobile devices to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarm rings during the meeting, please can everyone leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit. Do not use the lift, and please go to the fire assembly point, which is located at the bottom of the car park by the garages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the benefit of those who are watching this meeting online, please would members introduce themselves during the meeting, if not already introduced by name. Right, first thing on the agenda is apologies. None have been received. Secondly, item 1, minutes. There are 2 sets of minutes that we need to approve. The first set is the minutes of the meeting of the 9th of March. Second one is the meeting with the full council on the 22nd of May. Members, are you aware that this is a true and accurate record of both those meetings and we may approve them? Thank you very much. Item 2, the usual declarations of interest. Councillor Wade.
Chairman, I have been a beneficiary of the green bag system, which we are going to talk about waste. So I suppose I have a sort of interest in that respect. I note that, but I don't think it is necessarily prejudicial.
I can't see the link actually, Malcolm, but yes, okay, thank you very much. Yes. Right, no others. If you think you've got one when we get to the item, let me know. Item 3, public participation, there are none. Right, item 4, that's the terms of reference. In essence, it's just something for panel members to note that our sphere of influence spreads to that list which is on the return page of the AGM, of the agenda. So it's just to note that those are the subjects we cover. Item 5, the annual performance and provisional budget outrun 2022-2023. I can now hand over to Rebecca Drummond and Kevin Green.
Thank you, Chairman.
Please.
So I'll do a brief introduction to the report, and the report's in 2 sections. So then I'd like to spend a bit of time going through some of the detail of the annual report, the highlights relevant to this panel. And Kevin Green will go through the budget outturn again quite briefly. I'd also like to take the opportunity to introduce our new performance and insight manager, Saqib Yassin, who's with me tonight, and Saqib will be presenting this report in the future.
Welcome.
So in terms of the
Becky,
report...
would you speak up a bit, please? I forgot to put my email.
Of course, I will also move this nearer. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
So the report sets out the annual performance and budget outturn. So as I've mentioned, 2 main elements. One is the annual performance in respect of delivery of the corporate plan, and one is the provisional budget outturn. So this is a backward-looking report in both respects. So it looks at the performance for the last year, which is why you'll find the performance by the historic portfolios, so the previous 8 portfolios. In terms of forward-looking, so the annual report would also usually consider an action plan for the future year. The focus this year will be on the development of the new corporate plan and the new administration's priorities for 2024 to 2028. So just some highlights for this particular panel. So there's a mixture in here. So I'll start with the fact that the Council received £1 million through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and an additional £540,000 as part of the Rural Development Programme to support delivery of the 3 investment priorities of community in place, supporting local business and people and skills. The coastal team continue to develop plans and funding opportunities to protect our coastline. And work has been undertaken to ensure greater resilience at Hurst Spit, and you'll see in the highlight report the statistic around 7,600 cubic metres of shingle being recycled from North Point onto the Spit in the last year. The new waste strategy was approved during the year, which aims at increasing recycling, reducing waste and carbon emissions. The council's teams responded to 2,500 fly tipping incidents, and arrangements have been put in place to collect and dispose of specialist waste containing persistent organic pollutants, such as soft furnishings. In terms of the planning service, 5 strategic planned sites now with planning consent, and development is commenced on 2 of these. 1,133 planning decisions were issued, 91% of which were determined within the prescribed timescales. 580,000 was spent on recreational mitigation projects, with a programme of projects for this coming year already approved. The building control share increased to 58% from 55% last year. 12 additional electric charging points were installed during the year, with a total saving of 18,000 kilograms of CO2 to date, and phase 2 of the programme is now underway. The council continued to work with partners and businesses to help grow the local economy, with 49 businesses and residents benefiting from the Startup Business Support, just over 3,500 subscribers to the Business Support e-newsletter, and 78 shop doctor visits were carried out to help support local high streets. And lastly from me, just in terms of some of those highlights, 86 young people were supported with skills training and routes to employment through the Youth Employment Hub. And I'll hand over to Kevin on the finances.
Thank you, Becky. Chairman, this report contains the financial outturn position for the General Fund, Housing Revenue Account and the Capital Programme. The 2022-3 budget was set in February 2022, and 3 financial monitoring update reports were presented to Cabinet in August, November and February. Generally, a provisional outturn report is presented to Cabinet in May, but due to everybody's involvement in the elections this year, that did not happen, and therefore this report contains more information than it normally would. The appendices show the financial position movement from the original budget and details of all new items not previously reported to Cabinet. In summary, despite significant budget pressures from areas such as the pay award, utility costs and general price increases, the overall General Fund outturn is close to the original budget, with no requirement to draw on unallocated resources or reserves. Similar budget pressures arose in the Housing Revenue Account, resulting in a £1.2 million call on reserves for the year, but I suspect that will be discussed in more detail at the actual housing panel next week. And finally, the capital programme shows an outturn spend of £43.7 million against an original budget of £42.1 million. But this does include additional projects identified and approved during the year. Happy to take any questions on the detailed appendices if members have any, Chairman.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Wade.
Actually, I've got 2 questions. One on the KPIs and one on the budget outturn. So can I do the budget outturn one first? Okay. It's my understanding that in the 2022 to 23 budget, a year ago, we put 1.25 million from the general fund in the capital fund to pay for any pension fund imbalances, which may or may not, that might be wrong, but that's what was explained to me at the time. And I don't think in the end that we needed it. Now it appears from the budget outturn, the capital fund has that surplus of 1.747 million with rephrasing. So the 2 questions I have, unless that initial bit of information is totally wrong, which I don't think it is. Can you explain what the rephrasing is in the capital budget? And then the 942,000 underspend, which is after that all been done, is that going to remain in the capital budget, or is that going back into the general fund?
Chairman, there are a whole number of points there. Perhaps if I try and...
If it's something you want to reply in an email...
Well, no, let's just try and deal with something now. If I can deal with it tonight, we will, and if not, then I can pick up some issues afterwards. I think the contribution to the capital programme that the Councillor Bade refers to is it's in Appendix 2A, and the original budget allowed for £1.75 million to be contributed to the capital programme. I think that funding was unable to go in there because in previous years we have had a budget, as Councillor Wade said, of about £1.25 million set aside in anticipation of having to pay more into the pension fund. Because that hasn't had to happen, we've been able to reallocate those resources and then allocate those into the capital programme. So hopefully that deals with that part of it. And again, in Appendix 2A, what you'll notice is that even though we identified 1.75 to go in the end of the year, we only actually utilised 1.675 because they were the only resource ever available. So effectively, that was the balancing figure within the general fund. So, as I say, fairly close to the original budget. And given the number of variations that we had during the year, to be honest, that was a remarkable outturn, really, to be that close, given the pressures on. So that deals with, hopefully, that contribution. And you referred to rephasing in the capital programme. I mean, those items are identified in the second to right-hand column in Appendix 3. What those items are is where we've actually identified some budget provision in the year for capital schemes, and that hasn't necessarily happened during the year, so the money gets carried forward into the next financial year to fund the project in the new year. I hope that deals with most of it, but if perhaps you want to come back and...
Yes, that money that we put in for pensions, actually, if it was in the general fund still, could have been used on something else, but that's not a question for you. Okay, I've got a question on KPIs. Okay, well now, looking at the KPIs and having a business background where I'm used to looking at detailed KPIs, I noticed that on the housing KPI, I've got a number of questions, so I'll run through them. There are 3 with no targets. Why do you have a key performance indicator if you haven't got a target? That's the first question. Do you want me to go through them one at a time?
I'm happy to look at the housing isn't a matter for this panel, but I'm happy to respond in any way that I can.
You can respond outside of the meeting if it helps.
Okay, yeah. Let me have your questions. If I can respond, I will.
Okay.
If not, I will email you with responses.
Well, this one's a bit more straightforward. Under the homelessness KPI, we have 2 failed KPIs, but they're not in red, they're in white. You know, the idea of a traffic light system is green, you're on target, amber, you're close, red, you didn't hit it, but they're in white, which is unusual because poor old waste gets in red because it didn't hit the target. So why is waste singled out when all the others don't seem to be? People and places KPIs, 4 out of 6 failed for the past 2 years, but there's been no target. I'll email them to you at the end, if you like.
Yeah, please do. I can answer why most of them are white, and that's because they don't have a target. So where they don't
I know
have
that's what I mean.
an indicator, but I know your point about the first 2 housing ones.
You can't have a key performance indicator without a target. It just doesn't make sense. So, a partner, when we have got targets like partner well-being, they're low. I will put these in an email and send them to you so they can just it. The point I'm trying to make, members, is that if we're going to provide data to look at how we're doing, it's got to be meaningful, accurate, and actually show the people of the New Forest what the council's about. Having KPIs and no targets, or we fail targets and don't put the right colour, isn't really doing them the service they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Can I ask, Rebecca, when you do reply your email, could you circulate it to members of the panel, please?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was pleased to hear that we got 540,000 from the Rural Development Fund. I mean, that's a real bonus for people and skills. I noticed we've just got 3,000 people on the business support newsletter. What are we doing to increase that, and what can we do as councillors to help with that?
If I may, Chair, in helpful response, obviously the...
James, could you introduce yourself?
Sorry, I can. Sorry, James Carpenter, Strategic Director of Place Operations and Sustainability. From our perspective, obviously the Shared Prosperity Fund, there are a number of strings to that. In terms of economic engagement, clearly we are looking to use all different sources. We are working closely with internal comms colleagues to see how they can support that programme and to promote it. I mean, obviously, yes, we have a newsletter, but there are other means of measuring. Whether that is a KPI we would use going forward was obviously one for the administration to consider going forward, bearing in mind that we didn't really add many people to it. I think it's probably something we want to keep under review as to whether that's a helpful KPI or whether there is another way of measuring our actual engagement with business.
Yes. Peter.
I did ask the question, how can councillors do something?
How can councillors assist with promoting business? Well, I would expect that councillors are always promoting the services of the council to business. We would obviously encourage that, and always directing people to our resources that we have available, redirecting people to our kind of comms and our social media. I think that's probably a useful way that members can direct members of the public to our support. And if they have businesses they're in contact with and they want some further advice from the council, then clearly the Economic Development Service will be happy to help.
All right, Peter. Thank you. Thank you, James.
Keith.
Councillor Grays.
Thank you, Chair. Got the right one on. We're fortunate, and we have been very fortunate on the financial perspective. If I go back to the pension fund and the liability of, it is less. We've had the actuarial review, which I think is every 3 years. And what they've come back with is that irrespective of the conditions in the marketplace where you see inflation and so on and so forth, the pension fund liability we have has been reduced. That, in a way, frees up, in inverted commas, more funding that could be used elsewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed. Thank you. Right, I think we are complete. Everybody? Okay, right. In that case, I can refer you, please, to the recommendations on page 5. And are we in agreement with the full set out?
Agreed.
Agreed, everybody? Thank you very much. Thank you, Rebecca. Right. Item 6, waste and recycling collection policy. And Nicola Plummer, could you deliver this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Nikki Plummer. I'm the Projects and Performance Manager for the Waste and Recycling Service. And I'm going to present to you today the report for the Waste and Recycling Collection Policy. You'll note there are 2 appendices to the report. Firstly, the Waste and Recycling Collection Policy, and then also additional document, which is the Garden Waste Terms and Conditions. And the report recommends today the adoption of these 2 policies. For a little bit of context, I think it's helpful to look back at the work that we've already done in terms of the waste and recycling strategy development, which has taken place over some years. Councillors and officers have obviously been working very hard over those few years to bring that document to approval. Starting back in 2018 on the release of the National Waste Strategy, which is the first document of its kind since 2007. It set out some key objectives of how we might deal with waste in the future, and a lot of that was subject to consultation. It set out new targets for local authorities in terms of our performance. For example, reaching a recycling rate of 55% by 2025, raising to 65% by 2035. So New Forest District Council is currently some way off that target. We have worked through the government consultations in 2019 and 2021. We've also carried out extensive research with expert consultants, other councils, and importantly, our own residents as well. As you will know, NFDC is a waste collection authority, so responsible for the collection of the waste and recycling. There's also obviously a need to dispose of those or onward processing, so we cannot work on our own. We need to work with those disposal authorities. So throughout the development of the strategy, we have worked with Hampshire County Council, our Waste Disposal Authority, and the other 13 authorities across Hampshire to ensure that the collection methods and the disposal methods not only work or align with each other, but also that they are in line with that future government legislation. So we signed an agreement with Hampshire in late 2021 to commit to a new twin stream disposal method for our recycling that obviously impacts the way that we have to collect material from our residents. So following this, we then approved the new waste strategy last year. So that set out this new collection system, which was both in line with those government requirements and also in line with the new disposal methods set out in the agreement with Hampshire. So just to look back at what that collection system is going to be in the future, it will be offering a weekly, separate weekly food collection service to our residents, and then changing the dry recycling service to that twin stream, which is a collection of paper and cardboard separately in a reusable bag, and then the other materials, the plastics, the glass and the metals in a wheeled bin. Both of these elements will be collected fortnightly on the alternate week to the general waste, and then the general waste will be collected in a wheeled bin, obviously on the alternate week to the dry recycling. And then the final element is the collection of garden waste, which is currently a sack collection service, so that's a move to a wheeled bin service for that subscription-based collection service. So this move to the new collection system obviously will then require significant investment in terms of the disposal infrastructure, which is managed by Hampshire County Council. So that actually includes the build of a new material recovery facility, which is where we sort all the materials. Obviously, they're coming in a different way. They need to be sorted in a different way. And on top of that, there's investment needed in the waste transfer network that obviously our operatives use and we use for our transfer of waste. So this is why we currently plan to roll out the core collection services in 2025 in line with the availability of that new infrastructure being ready for us. The garden waste changes, however, are not dependent on that new infrastructure, so that's something that we can move forward with more quickly. And the planning for this change to the wheel bin service is now well underway. And those bins will be rolled out to residents ready for the start of that service in 2024. So that's really why we're bringing these two documents to you now for approval. The collection policy is an overarching service document which sets out how we will deliver those core services to our residents. Some of that is very much unchanged from current practice. For example, our position on how we deliver assisted collections, that will remain the same. So if residents are unable to get their containers to the curbside, they will be able to apply for an assisted collection. Our operatives will collect their waste and then return their container to that agreed place. Obviously, a lot of what's in this document is new. It needs to account for those changes in containers, new ways of working, also needs to consider how our administrative systems can support that service improvement. So this main core policy won't come into effect until we do roll out those core services, which is currently planned for 2025. The garden waste terms and conditions, we need those to align, and they do align with the collection policy so that those working practices are consistent against all of those waste streams, and that we've got that continuity for our residents and also for our operatives in terms of the way that they're working across waste streams. So these terms and conditions will be implemented in April 2024 when we start those wheel bin collections for the garden waste service. To touch on the collection policy, it's been written with a view to maximising the efficiency of the service, maximising health and safety for our operatives and members of the public, maximising environmental benefits, and then maximising our sort of overall service performance. I think you'll appreciate it's very difficult for us to run through the whole of those documents today. It is quite lengthy. But to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of the items in there, I can talk a little bit about how we would manage additional waste. So to encourage recycling, we need to provide adequate recycling services at the right frequency and the right capacity. And we also need to restrict the householders' ability to throw away those valuable materials into the general waste. And so we need an effective policy in place that deals with the additional side waste that may be left, while also appreciating that some households do have additional waste needs and may need larger bins. So this has operational benefits in terms of efficiency and health and safety for operatives, not having to collect the additional side waste or manually sort bags. It has environmental benefits in terms of encouraging recycling of those valuable materials and food waste, and overall boosting our sort of service performance. I think there are obviously a number of other examples that we could go through that offer those same similar benefits. So within the policy, we do cover things such as the presentation of waste, the capacity that we offer to residents, how we might deal with contamination, ownership and replacement of containers, and so on and so forth. But I think it might be better to open up to questions from members to discuss any specific queries on any of those points. I think to close, I would just say we are in the very fortunate position that we are one of the very few remaining councils in England to make these kind of changes. And so the collection policy and the garden waste terms and conditions have been very much developed through looking at best practice, not just of councils across Hampshire, but from very high-performing authorities across the UK. And what we know from that is that a very strong and clear collection policy is key to the successful implementation of a new collection service. But I'll leave it there for any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Nikki. One point, I don't know if I missed it, but we've already committed to the supply of wheelie bins, am I right? And they have a very high percentage of recycled material.
We've committed to the supply of wheelie bins for the garden waste service, and yes, they are up to 95% recycled content for those bins, yes.
It's pretty large, pretty big. Thank you. Any questions of Nikki? Yes, Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, we had a surgery last week, and it was a topic of the conversation, actually, and people were asking, they were hearing rumours they're going to charge, no longer charge for the garden waste. Is that true, or is it still going to be chargeable?
Nikki or Chris, can you answer that?
Chris Noble, Assistant Director for Place Operations. So we have an item coming up shortly after this one about garden waste fees and charges. So yes, the garden waste service will continue to be a chargeable service. And
The second thing was people were asking, where on earth are they going to park up to 7 bins in most of my area? You know, no footpaths to put your bins on, etc. And also, the last meeting I had, where someone was coming to me specially about this, was they said most people they know their black bin is still not a suitable bin to be left for 2 weeks. You know, 1 week could be enough, especially in this heat. So is that still not something that's going to make you want to change it more often? I shouldn't think it's going to be helpful to the operatives to be collecting some of the waste that is in there.
Yeah, so I'll take the point about the 2-weekly collection for the residual waste. The main thing that's obviously in that residual waste that is going to cause any sort of smells and sort of offence is obviously food waste. Obviously what we want to do is remove that food waste from...
It was nappies and animal waste, actually, and there were about 3 or 4 people all agreeing with each other as though it was normal.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, nappies obviously for some people in warmer weather may be problematic. We would issue advice as to how to manage that waste in terms of wrapping and managing. And then also in a waste prevention sense, part of the work that we were doing will be on reusable nappies as well, and promoting the use of reusable nappies too.
Right, thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I know the last 4 years a lot of work went into getting where we are with this. I've got two questions, really. One of them is for the benefit for perhaps newer members. The top of the waste hierarchy is waste prevention. And we have discussed this in the working party to some degree. And while this strategy is focused on the collection, I get that, are we still pursuing that with the vigour that we should be doing? Because that is the top of the hierarchy and the fundamental for improving the environment. If you don't produce the waste in the first place, you don't have to pay somebody to get rid of it. So, and that should be a big driver for us as well as this. That's question number one. And the question number two is, I think I've raised this in the past as well, the issue of side waste. Now, in that, the issue of side waste is being dealt with by quite draconian penalties. You know, if there's a slight bit of waste on the top of the bin, we won't collect it. That, according to other authorities that brought in wheelie bins, that can lead to an increase in fly tipping. Because once people realise if they can't get in the bin, you know, especially in the semi-rural area that we live in, you know, the nearest wood or shall we say, a place where there's no people watching them will end up being dumped. And we have a lot of fly tipping at the moment anyway, and we don't want to be able to increase it. And I totally understand we can't have bins overflowing because there's health and safety issues for the team and that. But we need, I think, just to look at a more, I don't know really, see how other areas deal with it. It can't just be by a draconian measure. There must be a way of addressing sideways. I know in particular the Isle of Wight had a different way of doing this. And perhaps James, with the experience of this in other areas, might be able to throw something into that. But those are the two questions.
Okay, so firstly on waste reduction, as you know, one of the appendices to the main waste strategy was a full waste reduction plan, and I think we, as a council, we still fully plan to support that in terms of the additional resource that was set out in that and the measures that we want to take, obviously at the top of the hierarchy, to help residents reduce their waste ahead of recycling. In terms of your second question regarding side waste, I think from evidence that we've looked at, we haven't necessarily found that other councils have had an increase in fly tipping. Ahead of any sort of enforcement action, we will be looking to carry out engagement and education activities to ensure that residents are sort of fully informed about what they can recycle, what they can't recycle. And then also the other thing is that we do believe that across the waste streams that there is enough capacity for residents to, if they are using those services properly, to dispose of all that waste. And then thirdly, for additional waste within the district, we also have obviously use of the HWLCs for residents as well.
All right, Malcolm.
The reason I raised it was because one of our local residents in our area used to be in charge of waste of the Isle of Wight when they brought wheelie bins in. And he raised this point with me, would you find out what you thought he was going to do? So it wasn't just an off-the-cuff comment that I asked that question. Because as I remember bringing it before, we really do need to look into this in some detail because we don't want to increase fly tipping. One of the challenges is that we have been so poor at communicating with our residents about managing waste. That's why currently the number of clear bags that have the wrong and stuff in it are so high. It is a very high percentage. We really need to, if we're going to start penalising people, we need to do a lot more work in advising them what they should and shouldn't do. And we have discussed this in the past. And the amount of money that we put on publicity for this, I know needs to go up. Because again, it's one of the lowest in the country. So we need to change that if we're going to put people in this position. They need to be given all the help they can to avoid getting into trouble. And I do think that we need to focus on that.
So I can just perhaps assist there, just in terms of some of the things I've probably witnessed since joining the council and from other experiences elsewhere. I actually was out on the bin lorries on Friday. I left my home at 4:10 in the morning and had a whole morning out with the crews. 27-degree heat, 15-mile walking behind the van itself. Seagulls doing their absolute best to destroy the bags and waste everywhere. I absolutely have to commend the kind of move from personal experience, both in other places I've worked and lived, and also having witnessed what I witnessed on Friday. It will make a massive difference to residents. It will make a massive difference to the crews and the health and safety and the well-being and the environment as a whole. I absolutely agree that a massive part of what we will need to do as part of the rollout is about education, support, understanding, communication, and sharing as much information as we possibly can to help people understand the kind of processes that they're going to be. I think what you've got here for you in front of you tonight are the policies and the frameworks that are to shape the service. That whole piece around communication, that whole understanding about what do I do if I've got nappies, what do I do if I've got this use. I can tell you there's lots of things we will recycle, and that there's plenty of things we don't. I can tell you from my time on Friday, we don't recycle car number plates, but one of our residents thought we do, maybe because they were plastic. So that's the kind of thing we need to make sure we're sharing. Part of the joy of me being out with the crews was taking lots of photos, so we've got some promo material I'm sure that we can use there, but there will be lots of comms, lots of engagement, and the team are really going to be focused on that whole education piece, supporting our communities to adopt and embrace and really see the benefits of these changes.
Thank you, James. Your early start with the cruise, you really know how to enjoy yourself, don't you? It's, well done. Thank you very much. I have a list, members. Next, Councillor Reid, please.
Oh, right, sorry. Next then. Thank you. I think it's a brilliant strategy, and I think James is right. There's a lot of communication needed. This strategy itself will remove a lot of plastic waste from the waste stream, of course, because we won't no longer be using plastic bags. Have we any idea of how much plastic waste we will be taking out of the waste stream by adopting this policy? Just approximately 50,000 bags.
Chris?
Yeah, it's a significant number of bags, given that we give 36 recycling bags per roll, 26 refuse bags per roll to our residents twice a year. So a significant number. We have done the analysis. I don't have it in front of me. We have done the analysis before, looking at the quantity of plastic that we issue through the sacks versus the quantity of plastic that would be in the wheel bins when they come in. And there is a period over time over which, you know, eventually, not as long as you'd think actually, the amount of plastic is sort of becomes a positive situation as far as we're concerned, that we're using less plastic through the wheel bins, because they obviously last a long time. They have a lifetime of 20 plus years. So we know that in the long run we'll be reducing our plastic use by the move to wheel bins, even though there'll be obviously a lot of plastic in that initial rollout. That will compensate for itself once we get rid of the single-use sacks.
Thanks, Chris.
Right. Thank you, Chris. Next on my list is Councillor Glass.
Thank you. I've had a lot of concern from elderly people, even older than me, who are limited mobility. They just want to make sure that without going to websites, because most of them don't use them, it'll be easy to get assisted emptying of the bins. Because although they've got a two-storey house, most of them have got stair lifts, and can't get up the stairs, and can't get hold of a wheelie bin in case it falls over on them. You know, some of the people that are very unsteady on their feet. Will it be really easy to get hold of or to get assisted removal of the waste bin?
Yes, I mean, the assisted collection system will not change as to how it is now, and at the moment residents can either apply for that service online, or they can call our customer services team, who will obviously fill out that application on their behalf. So anybody that requires assistance collecting their waste or getting their waste to the curbside will be able to apply for it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Glass. Councillor Sleep, you're not on committee, but thank you for your interest in how the panel is functioning. You did want a question though, so
yes, thank you, Chair.
please ask it.
I know the team have been working for years to try and sort these issues out on bins, and I know it's been very controversial and must be extremely hard work for everyone. So I'll try a different tack now. Financially, I was just interested the other day that these new trucks cost 140,000. And if you're actually trying to roll this out in 2024, what's the programme for trying? Are you going to convert your existing vehicles to bin arms on the back, or are they already involved? I mean, is there a big financial implication?
So it's a mix, depending on what the vehicles are and what we want to use them for. So we've been quite careful with our vehicle replacement programme in the last few years to try and make sure that we're planning ahead as much as we can. We deliberately haven't been buying sort of new vehicles in the last, say, 24 months that we know are going to be obsolete in a couple of years' time, because that's obviously not a financially efficient way of replacing vehicles. So if I give the example of the garden waste service, we will be retrofitting bin lifts to the back of the garden waste vehicles. So what we did do when we bought the last round of vehicles, we sort of future-proofed, and we got some of the plumbing, so to speak, already included on the bin lorry, so that when it came to adding a bin lift in the future, that would be a relatively straightforward process to put the bin lifts and add those onto the back. Other elements of the fleet will be brand new, so the food waste collection vehicles, for example, will be brand new bespoke vehicles, as will the recycling vehicles, because the recycling vehicles are going to collect 2 streams on one vehicle. So from the side, looks very much like a normal refuse collection vehicle, but if you were to go to the back, you'd see that it would be split down the middle, one side for one stream of recycling and the other side for the other. So a bit of a mix in terms of what we've got now being retrofitted or being purchased new.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Peter Armstrong. Peter.
Sorry. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested where the food waste is going to. Have we got a biomass plant or someone who's taking it, or is it all going to the burner?
So the food waste will be sent for a process known as anaerobic digestion. As something that Hampshire have been looking at in terms of capacity of current plants that are available to us. So they've been looking at anaerobic digestion facilities currently in Hampshire and just on the outskirts of Hampshire. And they tell us at the moment that there's capacity within those current AD plants to take the additional food waste from Hampshire certainly in those early years. So yeah, that's how it would be disposed of, and obviously sent to our transfer stations and then moved on to those plants.
Right, thank you, Nikki. I think that's everybody. Yes, it is indeed. Right, I referred to members of the panel to page 27. It's the recommendation on the waste and recycling collection policy, and the recommendation is to recommend it to Cabinet. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Item 7, garden waste fees and charges, and this is Chris Noble, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So a relatively short report, and it does link into the previous item of discussion to a degree, because it talks a little bit about future service change and how the service is going to operate differently in the future. So there are some quite clear linkages between the two subjects of discussion. We are having to have this discussion about fees and charges for garden waste earlier than we normally would. We would normally be going through this process in sort of January, February time. But because of the rollout programme for the bill bins for garden waste, we need to have the discussion now, essentially, so that we can prepare for the introduction of those bins. So just a little bit of background. The council operates a subscription-based service for garden waste in reusable bags. We have about 1 in 4 households that take part in that scheme. All other councils in Hampshire also have garden waste as a chargeable service. They all use wheel bins for that service. Our charges for our service have historically been among some of the lowest in Hampshire. We are moving towards that wheel bin service as discussed as part of as what's set out in the waste strategy. And the plan is to have those wheel bins introduced ready for the 1st of April 2024, so the next subscription year, if you like. So we will have a simplified charging structure, and there are proposals in Appendix 1 around what that charging structure would look like, and that new charge is aligned with the median charge from across all of Hampshire. The highest charge in Hampshire for this current year is Hart District Council at £80. Our proposal is for £65. That service will be rolled out using the new 240 litre wheel bin, and those bins have twice the capacity of one of our current reusable bags, and therefore represent an increase in their capacity for customers. So the timeline is that we will be asking customers to sign up to this new service during the autumn, so that we can gather all that information about where the customers are that wish to have the wheel bin, so that we can start delivering those bins after Christmas to have them ready in place for April. There is a table in 4.6 which just splits out our current customer base based on the number of sacks that they have, just to illustrate how that sort of is profiled across the different numbers of sacks. So you'll see that the largest majority of our customers have one bag, but we do also have a significant number of customers that currently have two bags. And you can see across the table there, likely charging for next year, where we're not introducing where we're sticking with the current sort of price structure based around reusable bags, what the capacity is in those bags, and what the price will be for next year according to the approach set out in Appendix 1. As Nikki alluded to earlier, we have also produced some new terms and conditions for this service, which very much align with that waste collection policy, so that we have everything in line, ready to go for the new service. Financial implications, so we have a base budget for income this year of £1.13 million, and we've made an assumption that number of customers will remain consistent for next year. Actually, in other authority areas over the period of, say, the first couple of years of a wheel bin introduction for garden waste, subscription numbers actually tend to go up rather than stay the same. So we will see, obviously, how that pans out over the next couple of years for us. And there are obviously some increased direct operating costs at the moment in terms of things like fuel and salaries, which that increase in price will help to cover. That brings us to the end of the report. There is, as I discussed, the appendix which sets out the collection charge and also a bin supply charge per bin. One thing I didn't mention was to encourage people to sign up soon and be part of that main wheel bin rollout. We are doing what we're calling an early bird offer, whereby people who sign up early will get their bin for free. After that initial sign-up period, there would be a supply and delivery charge for that container, which again is set out in Appendix 1. As per what Nikki was saying earlier around the waste collection policy, we are very much looking at other councils and learning from what they do in terms of our charging structure. And, for example, the fact that we are proposing to charge for the supply of the bin is something that lots of other councils do. So very much trying to align with what's already been done in other areas. I think that brings it to conclusion, so I shall pause there for any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chris. What I want to know is, obviously it's a £5 a month it works out for that garden bin if you have one bag or two bags actually as well, because you've put it down to 65 for two. If people try it and then decide they don't think it's worth it, do you just get the bin collected back and cancel the payment? Is that going to be on offer? Or once you've said you'll do it, you're stuck with it?
I think generally the way the service runs now is if you've obviously signed up for the year, then that is your payment taken, you're added to the round, and you're part of that service. So I don't think at the moment we have that sort of ability, and I think in the terms and conditions, I'm not sure exactly what we say off the top of my head about that. So I'd have to have a look at that. I can come back to you on that and let you know what the approach to that would be.
It's seasonal, isn't it? It's gone off. It's seasonal, that's all I was thinking, is that, you know, a sort of couple of months a year you've got hedges, grass, etc. But for quite a few months you haven't got that much to go into a 240 litre. So I was just thinking, would you think it's going to be something neighbours are going to join together and do?
Yeah, that would be absolutely fine if neighbours wished to do that. So one neighbour would obviously need to be the named person and be the person that signs up and pays. Yeah. But if neighbours want to work together to share a container, to share the garden waste, particularly as you said, for those, you know, if there are the quantities aren't that high, and particularly at quieter times of the year, that would be fine for residents to share that container. That's fine. Okay,
so it would be a big 240 litre plastic bin, but only 2 bags to go in it. Is that right? So
the capacity of that wheel bin is the equivalent to 2 of the current reusable bags. So material would go into that bin loose, if you like. Garden waste would need to go into the bin loose, not bagged or anything. But okay. Yeah, it's equivalent to 2 bags in terms of the size.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I can declare my interest because I've been a customer of this service in the past. Where we moved house, we don't need it as much now.
Yes.
I have 2 questions, really. Because we're actually making the customers pay for the bin. Now, we're not making the general waste customers pay for their wheelie bins. but we're making the green waste customers pay for the bin, and that's intrinsic in the charge. Because if you've got, you have one sack now, one bag, you're going to get a 44% hike for the equivalent bin. Whether you're an early bird and you get the bin for free or not, the price is going up somewhat dramatic. Because I understand the premise that we charge, a lot of authorities charge for collecting green waste. Some don't, but a lot do. But it's the measure of the rise that I think is somewhat concerns me, not from a personal basis, but from a generic basis, because it's significant. And we're actually making them pay for the bin, whether they like it or not. Whereas we never made them pay for the bags, although it may have been in the cost of the bag was in the service. And I'm not sure this will go down as well with our residents as perhaps you might think. And I don't think this is anything new that we're saying. So the premise of making pay for the bin, I think, is challengeable. And also, there are many of our roads where now our refuse vehicles can't go. What do we do? Are they going to be able to have a green bag? In which case they shouldn't be paying the same amount as if someone's got a bin, because they're not paying for a bin.
Okay, I'll just take the second one first, if that's all right. So we do have a collection round, which we call one of our narrow access rounds, which for 1 day a week collects from garden waste customers in parts of the borough that other vehicles can't get to. So we do have the ability to continue to provide a wheeled bin service for those garden waste customers through use of a smaller vehicle, which would be able to empty wheelie bins much the same as a large vehicle. So that will enable us to get to some of those difficult to access areas, if you like, to make sure we can provide the bins where we need to. In terms of the charging for the bin, there is a mix of approaches from councils to that. Some do charge for the bin, some don't. So that's a choice for different authorities to make. It's a discretionary sort of service. Residents don't have to obviously sign up to the garden waste service. There are other outlets open to people, including use of household waste recycling centres, home composting. So there are other routes for people to use. I guess it's a matter of us trying to operate the service in the most cost-effective fashion. Also encourage residents, once they've got their bin, to take some ownership and sort of look after it, make sure that it doesn't get lost, doesn't disappear down the road, and have that kind of bit of ownership, which we know is an issue with our current reusable bag service, and comes at quite significant cost in terms of the replacement cycle of those bags, which wear out, get blown away, cause various other problems. So I think overall the bin approach and the charging is what we've determined will give us those best outcomes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Anybody else? No, that's everybody. Right, okay, panel. Under this item, I need to refer you to page 53 on your agenda sheets, and it's a recommendation to Cabinet for the adoption. And are we agreed with that recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed?
No, still, that would be charging them that much. That's my personal view.
One against? Two against? Thank you. It's agreed.
Everybody else for it. Everybody else is for it.
Yes, great. Right. Item... Make it three. You want to do a formal vote? Okay, all right. But apparently we need to be formal now because there is, shall we say, alternative voting. So can I ask all those in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hand.
6.
And all those against?
3.
It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, item 8, portfolio holders. Councillor Tip and Councillor Blunden. Who would like to go first, please, gentlemen?
I'm happy to.
One of the two.
I'm
Right,
happy to
okay.
lead in. Yeah, Councillor
Councillor
London,
Blunden, please, yes.
portfolio holder for environment and sustainability. Actually, I don't think I think the waste items have really been covered well tonight, and I think a couple of, I'm sure everybody would agree, a couple of excellent reports and quite some detail to that. A couple of things I'd just like to touch on is coastal. And I just want to remind members of the number of public exhibitions that are taking place over the next few weeks, which detail the various options for a sustainable future for part of our New Forest District Council coastline. Firstly, the Christchurch Bay and Harbour strategy consultation, in particular the section from Chewton Bunny, which is at Highcliffe to Hurst Spit, and that is led by BCP and supported by the environment agencies working with NFDC. The second one is Hurst Spit to Lymington, coastal strategy and engagement. That one is led by the environment agency, again working with NFDC. These strategies look to identify the actions and options that may be put into place along this really beautiful coastline to ensure the protection from the impacts of climate change, both now and in the future. The financial implications for all our stakeholders, and particularly NFDC, will be significant. So I would ask all members to go along, and for those that are watching this meeting on YouTube as well, members of the public, do go along to these exhibitions. The other one is, if I can just touch upon, is the No Mow May campaign, which we took part in, which encourages people to let vegetation grow as food for pollinators and create protection for nature. The reduced cutting regime also lowered the council's carbon footprint, fewer journeys to and from our depots, and through reduced use of grass cutting equipment. As you would expect, we've had a few complaints on the lack of grass cutting, which is more in the urban areas, and now, as we resume the cutting, the issue of long grass cutting as these are not collected. However, I think generally, I believe the initiative has been welcomed and extremely well received by our residents. But we'll be monitoring and seeking public feedback on any specific areas which did cause a problem. One other one is our toilet public convenience replacement programme. Just like to pick up on that. The one at Barton on Sea, that is scheduled for replacement, and that is due to be undertaken during the next few weeks, linking it in line really with the ideal opportunity to make sure it's ready for the start of the season for not only residents but our holiday makers who visit the area. I don't normally get excited about toilets particularly, but this one at Barton, it is what is known as a simple beach hut design, and if you have a look at it on site, it really is in keeping with the cliff at Barton and the beach. So it fits in well, rather than just a normal block, which is a toilet. That's about it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blundell. Your subject would be a matter of bums on seats, wouldn't it? Yeah. Councillor Glass.
Thank you. On the No Mow May, I can understand that, but at Fawley Parish Council last night, we heard that quite a lot of people are moaning, and really moaning, when they've got the long grass where their children used to play just outside the houses, and also along some of the sides of the road where you literally can't see to pull out. So can we have mow soon June, please?
I'll leave that to the portfolio to decide. Councillor Wade was next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the work that NFDC is doing on the coastline to the west of Lymington is excellent. You know, very detailed, very good. But NFDC is responsible for all the coastline of this district. And for those of us that represent areas to the east of Lymington, do we need to invest in boats and wellies? Are NFDC going to really do something about protecting our coastline? Because they are significant in their absence with that same level of input that you are west of Lymington, that the authorities west of Lymington. And we have the Freeport coming, and we have individual developers building seawalls, but there needs to be a focus. And I know the Environment Agency and money are both contributors to this, but we really do need to see the same level of focus on the east than we do on the west.
Yeah,
Councillor Blunden,
yeah, just come back on that. The section you refer to, unlike the other sections, don't actually suffer from coastal erosion to the extent as the other sections do. So that's the first point I want to make. The other point I want to make is it's about priorities, and the information that I've been given on the risk of that on that particular section are not the same. So you've got to look at them from a risk point of view. Where flooding is obviously still a risk, but that element of it is firmly within the Environmental Agency remit.
When a large container ship goes down Southampton water, it produces tidal waves that are really significant effectors of coastal erosion. Right, and Southampton is one of the busiest container ports in Europe, and that side of the forest, which is Fawley down to Totton, is affected by this. And we have flooding in Hythe, and we have flooding in other parts. I know, I've got pictures if you don't believe me. So, no, there is a need for focus on this, and I can't stress enough how much this authority needs to look at that.
Okay, I've got a list. Next was Councillor Craze.
Two things. Moving away from flooding in one sense and flooding in a different sense, I chaired the Task and Finish group that had the pleasure of visiting 8 of the public convenience sites in the New Forest, in a very comfortable coach, I would say, very pleasant. But, as Councillor Blunden has said, it is really good that within the next few weeks we will have the new site down on the beach at Barton. It's a heavily used site during the summer months, and what it means is that you won't have either the extremely elderly or the extremely young having to rush up the hill and crossing a main busy road to go to the public conveniences on the top. As regards the work of the coastal people, I attended the exhibition, call it that, in Milford on Tuesday. A, I was amazed at how many members of the public were there. It was quite full. B, I was equally pleased to see that there was good representation from the Environment Agency, from Bournemouth Pool Council and from NFDC. They were all there willing to talk to anybody who had a question, and they were willing to cover it. The bottom line really on the whole thing is, looking at the whole coastline, we either do nothing, and in 100 years' time, not that it bothers us too much, but in 100 years' time, we might be underwater, or we try and do something now to protect some of the strategic areas and sites that are along the whole coastline. We will see how we go with the Environment Agency, and we will see how we go with, as Councillor Blunden has mentioned, the huge financial aspect of this project. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, that's great. Councillor Osborne.
I was going to say, Councillor Blunden was working with Steve Davies, your predecessor, and he actually visited and saw the various flooding that I was, talking about at the meetings here, and he did have great empathy. So if you could ever visit at the time of year when it's flooding, then you'll see that, I don't know why no one thinks that we aren't, but we've had things like Christmas was cancelled in Hythe because the restaurants and businesses were all flooded. Not long ago, I went to go past Onshore Road. You literally could not, because even with a 4x4, you would not have been able to pass on the road by the, is it a sailing club, isn't it? The sailing club there, the water was higher than the pavement by about a foot. And so in Waitrose, the car park, there's a big wall where the water, you'd think it was way below, is actually coming up and slopping over like a swimming pool. So we do need help, and we do need to be listened to.
Yes, certainly. I will be coming. I'll link up with you, and as I'm doing with a number of sites. Just to refer about what I'm saying, they're doing these strategic assessments in sections. Okay, and the first two sections are, as I said, from Hinglesbury Head right the way through to Hurst, and then you've got Lymington, and the next one will be the next stage on, which will cover through the waterside. But what I was trying to say to you, the flooding issues that you are experiencing are different. All these sites are different, and they need to be looked at in a different way. It's not that one section that you seem to refer to as getting more attention than the other, but they are, I understand, being done in a priority order.
Well, when I've tried to mention Calshot or Leap in particular, I'm always told that's not on the agenda. But if you go to Leap, we've lost feet. You know, the trees have all gone, which were there for all my lifetime. They've all gone now. So I think we are experiencing serious erosion, but somehow we're being pushed away into being, oh, that's Hampshire County Council or some other department, and I don't know what to do.
It is quite. It is in. I'm just picking up on this, but it is quite a challenging area. There are so many different ownerships of land involved, so many different stakeholders. You've got the environmental agency involved, all sorts of other agencies which are picking up. You've got Hampshire County Council. So we are just a partner in this big picture.
Right,
it's not. It's not all down to us.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Glass, you have a question.
Thank you. Carrying on with the east side of the area, Shore Road in Hythe, I helped to get the Scout Hut rebuilt there. And they've just made Shore Road the main way into the new industrial estate where they build the boats and have quite a lot of industry there. The only thing is you need a boat to get in there sometimes. Get the high tide or the spring tides, you've often got 18 inches of water above Shore Road. We've had to put bunds all the way around the Scout Hut. And really, it does need looking at. I know the chap that's just died that works in the community centre. Sorry? Yeah, I was thinking of the guy's name, but I know he's been working on it for about 10 years. Also, all of the slipways along that side, they're just clogged. You can't use them because the tides washed all the pebbles over the top. And Ashlet Creek, which is in my area, it's so silted up that a lot of it is unusable now, where it's quite a yachting centre. So I think we have got to have a look at the east, and things aren't as good as maybe you think they are over there, because we've just built a new industrial estate and encouraged a lot of people to go there. Okay, they do build boats, but they can't get over on 18 inches of water when the spring tides are up.
Well, I'm sure you'll take that on board, Councillor London, and refer to Steve Cook and his team as to dealing with the strategy around that area. Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. I too had a lot of queries about the grass being long, but as a horticulturist I was able to explain it to people, and most of them that I spoke to seemed to be okay. But what I would say, a lot of people didn't have prior notice that the information that went out before this didn't seem to be there to let people know it was going on this year. So I think for future years, people will get used to it, but for future years there needs to be some more communication out to people in publications that go out before May, because it caught a number of people, I found out, by real surprise and were wondering what was going on. But thankfully I was able to answer those queries with my expertise.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, and I will ensure that's picked up for next year.
Thank you. That's everybody. Thank you. Sorry, James, did you want to raise an issue?
Yeah, I think it's very helpful feedback, and we're very keen to get feedback. I think what I would say in a lot of cases, it wasn't we didn't mow in May, we just delayed the start of mowing. So in essence, what you've had is a peak of growth in this period to support the pollinators. That's the whole point of it. And obviously then the number of cuts that we normally do for areas we do for Hampshire, for example, we normally do 4 cuts a year. It's just the case that they'll still get those 4 cuts, just starting later in the year.
Thank you, James. I think that... Right. Councillor Derek Tipp, please.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening. First of all, I can say on the grass cutting issue that I had a complaint from a resident that grass had been cut. So you can't please everybody. They wanted it left long. But anyway, that's another matter. In my portfolio, well, as I say, I have only just recently taken it over, so there are a lot of issues that are coming up.
Derek, could you tell us the name of your portfolio?
Yes, certainly. It's economy and planning.
Thank you.
Okay. And on the planning front, we've got the issue of the town centre regeneration. That's ongoing. And officers are in discussion with the Tottenham Ealing Town Council, looking at various measures that might be brought forward. We've got, of course, the other thing that we are going to discuss, I believe, is how we're spending the SIL money, the Community Infrastructure Levy money, and we're looking at that. And I think a paper is going to come forward later in the year on that. Very pleased to report that the Shared Prosperity Fund is there and ready to be spent, and of course the Rural Development Fund as well. That's also going to be available for people to use probably in the rest of the year, in the autumn, say. So that's all good news. On the economy front, I actually attended an event in Lyndhurst, I think it was last week, called the Bee's Nest Pitching Competition. And it was great fun. It was a sort of Dragon's Den style event for local businesses to pitch what their business is going to do, and it was very well attended and well supported event. And the winner, I can't remember who it was, but they got £1,000 for their business, and all the others got very good publicity. And they've all had support from the firm that we work with called InQ Hive. InQ Hive's a local firm that deals with this. So that's about it, I think, Chairman. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Tipp. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Craze.
Not a question, just a comment that amongst the help with local economies, particularly in the High Street, was the Shop Doctor programme that visited many of the local towns in the area and gave good advice to each of the shop owners. And it was very welcome and very good advice. So something that we have done, and I suggest we look at doing it on an annual basis at least, to ensure that there is that connection between ourselves and the High Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I believe we will be doing that again.
Good. Thank you. Is that everybody? Sorry, Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I want to ask you about sustainable transport projects, because one of the KPIs is the number of projects at New Forest District Council involved in to deliver sustainable transport options. Now, we're all aware, because you attended the thing at Hanger Farm, I believe, about the A326. I'm sure, I thought you were there. You did. And it's all about the extra traffic generated by the Freeport, Fawley Waterside development and so forth. But one of the issues that look to this holistically, there is a level of public transport that goes along the waterside. There's a bus service, there's a ferry, and we're talking about train. But going from east to west, unless you have a car, it's non-existent. And the Lymington Hospital, which is the main hospital to New Forest, is not accessible by public transport from the east of the forest. And I noticed that sustainable transport projects are under your remit, and I wondered if this is something you could look at going forward, because this is a big issue for people of the waterside. Otherwise, there are a lot of elderly residents, we have an aging population, who are no longer able to drive, and if there's unless there's a hospital car scheme or some more charitable function to help they are stuck getting to Leamington Hospital. And I wondered what this authority can do to try and help resolve.
Councillor James Carpenter will respond.
Thank you. I think if it's helpful, I mean, this is one of those KPIs where actually we deliver through partners, and the main partner on sustainable transport is, of course, the County Council. So ultimately, it's from our perspective, it's about continuing to work with county partners to promote the pressures that we see in the New Forest, and how we maximise the free port to try and alleviate some of those pressures, and how we use the retained business rates to do that in this area. So I think it's a KPI that we very much address through support from partners. It's not something we have direct responsibility for. Clearly, if through development we can deliver cycleways or other improvements, then that's all part of the planning process side of things. But on the more strategic scale, things like the 326, it will be about working with the county partners.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, James. Councillor Glass?
I think Councillor Wade can put it in his diary that I agree with him completely on this one. I'm on Fawley Parish Council, and if you need to get to Leamington Hospital, you have to go from Fawley to the centre of Southampton by bus, which can cost a lot of money if you haven't got a bus pass. Then you go from Southampton on right the way round through Lyndhurst and down to Leamington. So if you need to go to hospital, you need to leave about 2.5 hours spare time. If you've got an early appointment, that's awkward. And it's also very expensive. So if you can use some pressure, we would really appreciate a bus, because at the moment I take quite a few people in my area to hospital because they cannot get there otherwise. So I think this one is one that needs to be given a lot more pressure. Thank you.
Well, I think that's something we need to take up with the Hampshire County Council. They fund the buses, so I think that's where we would have to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Any other questions? No. Thank you to Councillor Blunden and Councillor Tipp for their presentation. On to item 9, the work programme. I draw members of the panel's attention to page 58 and 59. It may change. Just to note the dates of the next meetings: 14th September, 11th of January next year, and 7th of March. Councillor Wade, please take note on page 59, the attention to what happens to Sill, etc. is being, it was mentioned earlier, it is being brought forward as soon as possible with the information you want. Right, well, there is nothing else on my agenda that is urgent. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank to officers as well. Hope it's not too late for you, but thanks anyway, and for the information and help. And thanks to members of the panel and other members. Thank you very much. Meeting